I believe the children are our future.
I thought you were going to. I believe I can fly. I believe I can.
That was when I was. That's when I was 12 years old, and well, actually 6 years old, and Superman came out.
Wow.
So yeah, I never believed I could fly.
Right,
I had more common sense than that. I did.
Did you?
I did.
I didn't. I tried. I definitely did. I mean, I tried over the pool. All right, welcome to another installment, to one of the first installments, I guess, of Less Heresy Than Expected podcast in this format. Would that be apt to say?
Yeah, we're definitely doing something new just to mix it up a little bit, give some variety to our audience that is eagerly anticipating the latest episode.
The latest. They're just biting at the bits. Now, I mean, at the end of the day, like, you and I just enjoy talking about this stuff.
Absolutely.
I mean, obviously you do. You're doing literally a THD stuff right now, and I'm just a fanatic for no reason. And so, what are we talking about today? What are we talking?
So, let's talk something psychologically. You know, what's going on, you know, what's been curious for us in that realm, you know, discovering what it means to be a human person with a psyche, this sort of thing, with emotions and relationships. I've been looking a lot into somatic theory and exercises and dealing with stress, although it may not seem like I'm doing that.
Well, tell me about that. What is, when you say somatic exercises, isn't all exercises somatic, if somatic means like physical?
Yeah, so it's like there's a great book called The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk.
For the record, it's a great book, as in, like, it's scientifically great. It's not like riveting.
It is. It's meant for academic level reading. So I wouldn't recommend just the casual lay reader pick it up and seek to gain from it. There's actually YouTube videos that will summarize the high points of what that is. But the idea is the body keeps a score. In other words, your body remembers the stressful situations that you've been in, especially from a young age. And so a lot of our reactions that we have nowadays as adults really have their roots in our childhood experiences. And sometimes we don't even, and I would say most of the time, we don't even realize that the reason we are reacting the way we are is because of those early childhood experiences.
Right.
And I know this is difficult for some people, especially those who are very intellectual, to not really kind of allow themselves to understand that this is a real issue. They very much intellectualize, you know, their problems and their emotions, but they never really discover what's underneath the carpet, as it were, what's swept under the carpet, which is the messages and the memories that your limbic system retains of your stress and trauma.
Yeah, and I would say it even like would limit it kind of limits them in their practices as they go about talking with other people. When, like, you're not able to necessarily give yourself the grace of still having an inner child, it's harder for you to give empathy to somebody else who also has an inner child to understand where they're coming from in that case. Right.
So it's really difficult, if not impossible, to give someone else empathy when you didn't experience it yourself. And that's really key. I know a lot of people who sort of deal with this, they would describe it as a fear of being annihilated, where there's no room for them in the relationship. Either, for example, a parent may not make room for the child's emotions and not allow the child to be emotional. They may not have an empathetic listening ear, as it were, you know, to be present with the child in their very dysregulated emotional state. A child in that in that emotional state can't think clearly. Their prefrontal cortex is not even fully developed yet, so they can't think clearly. They need a regulating presence of a parent. If they didn't get that, they'll try and get it elsewhere or through other behaviors such as addictions, thrill-seeking experiences, all these sorts of things.
Yeah, and I've been reading a book that Stephen Thor. I don't know what's the title for Icon Greek Gospel. The chair members.
The board of directors.
Yeah. So Stephen Thor, board of directors of a member of the board of directors between the three of us. He recommended for me to read the book No Drama Discipline. I don't remember who by. Okay. I think it was Haidt or somebody else probably. But No Drama Discipline talks about like the need of a child to be able to recognize how, like, learn how to regulate their emotions by their parents, through their parents. And so when you do something like Timeout, which I thought was just the natural consequence of, being, a troublesome kid, like, I thought that was just chill. I thought that was good. I thought that was what you do to discipline. Even to today, I'm learning through the book right now, but he talks about like how when you put a child in timeout, you are now removing them from the safest person in their life, the person who ought to be showing them how to cope and regulate their emotions and all these things. You're actively separating yourself from them. Like, what does that do for that kid? It's like, that's not helpful. Okay, so we have to figure out a different way of doing that. So yeah, I hear that. That's thought.
Yeah. So two things come to mind about helping a child regulate their emotions. Number one, some parents will do this who are trauma informed. They will regulate the child by demonstrating empathy with the child. In other words, if a child is throwing a tantrum, the parent will very calmly say, "Okay, my turn," and then the parent will cry out loud,
Nice.
and then stop and very calmly say, "Okay, your turn." And so the child and the parent learn to relate to each other in this way. There's a mirror neural function that's going on here, really pretty amazing.
That's interesting.
And so once the child sees the same emotions demonstrated in the parent, the child doesn't feel alone and so desperate, and they're open to being regulated by the parent who's empathetic to the same emotions. Another strategy that's really cool, I just came across this, is colors, using colors. So when a child is really frustrated, take them, and I admit, I am doing this without having practiced it myself. I'm taking this from another parent's word who is a psychologist and has written on this topic.
Well, both of us. Both of us are relating in that way.
So this psychologist's father uses colors, and when their child is emotional, he'll start pointing out colors. Where's red or where's blue in the room? Can you point at blue for me?
Interesting.
And another thing that's really interesting, this father says, something that's pretty curious is they'll look at something that's a yellow color, for example, and then they'll tell the child, "Oh, isn't that green?" And in this subtle twist, the emotions continue to die down, but then the prefrontal cortex
wait
kicks
a second,
in. No, that's yellow. And so there's subtle ways, to relate to a child emotionally and relationally, obviously, that will help them to regulate these really states of disorganization that can be learned and then used later on in life. And you're not going to end up with a child that is in trouble with the law, that is addicted to substances or habits or relationships. So it is very, in a healthy way, confident and independent.
Yeah, and I love how so that was also kind of mirrored in No Drama Discipline. I mean, I'm like 3 chapters in all frankness right now, but like he talks about like your child cannot actually like think or process when they're in that emotional state to a certain age. To a certain age, their brain isn't there's no interlink highway between emotion and logic, and so like you have to pull them out of the emotion, or like, you know, allow them time to sit in the emotion, let it die down before you can bring in the logic. There's no highway link between them. So they talk about that as well. It's interesting to me though on this topic when bringing it into we have a friend who works in a blue collar job, and I was telling him about what I was reading in this book that's very similar to what you're bringing up, and I was like, man, and it's, you know, blue collar workers are essentially just grown up children, but they never really learned how to regulate their emotions, so they're still very much children. It's interesting because if you were to allow them some time to let them get their emotions out and let them feel heard, they won't be as mad. They don't necessarily care about being right. They just care about being heard. And if they feel heard, then you can start to like explain and have you know, a useful dialogue. So I think that there's a lot of ways that, you know, studying even say the psychology of children, like you said at the beginning, because we don't grow out of that. We kind of just grow into that more over time. And so utilizing the research within that field to understand how to have productive conversations today. I mean, him and I were just having a conversation with an older lady that is very against the belief systems that you and I posit, and he was talking to me afterwards like, man, how you handled that was just crazy. Like she was, you know, going off the rails, and you were just very calm and collected and knew how to like regulate with her. And I was like, because there were certain times in the conversation I heard that she was just purely emotional. Like I kept asking her, okay, he saved us, Jesus saved us from what? She couldn't answer that question. She had to flip it to something else. No. But you don't understand. It's just very emotional. Like I'm not going to even, you know, maintain the conversation. So I asked it 3 different times, and that third time I realized she's in a very emotional state. I'm not going to be able to get, you know, through to her, have a productive dialogue unless we just, you know, calm down, move on, and then maybe later on I can bring it back up. And so I brought that up, and it's interesting how we can apply it in subtle ways. Even like, I wonder if you know, misidentifying colors would work in a blue collar workforce.
Yeah, well, I think part of what's going on as well is, you know, theology is one of those areas that really sort of touches on the deep-seated emotions that we have. For some, their theology is a deeply held sense of safety. It is a deeply held sense of community, a sense of family, an upbringing. If you're familiar with spiral dynamics, it is very much the contemporary society is very much within the blue area, which is purely moral, a sense of values, which is what is rampant and mainstream. Not necessarily wrong, but, you know, there's for lack of a better word, more mature areas. So I think anytime when you can allow this space for someone to... Is
this kind of what you're talking?
Yeah, that's
can you explain that a little bit?
So spiral dynamics, basically, it concerns your worldview, and it starts out with a very primitive tribal aspect where there are the events in the world are explained through deeply spiritual and religious meaning. It's very precarious, very capricious, and then there's a little bit more formal.
You're talking down at the very bottom of the tornado.
Tribal,
It's just
mystic,
chaos, kind of.
evil spirits, good spirits. Everything is a battle, and this is a very low level,
black and white.
And then as you progress upward in understanding how the world really works and how social relationships work, you begin to see what is more integrative and what is more exclusionary in social functions. So I forget because I'm talking about this off the cuff. I forget the different layers.
I've heard it before. I just haven't brought it up, and I'm not sure and how many people regularly have heard that. So continue with what you were saying though with.
Yeah, so basically what you were doing in this conversation is you were allowing this woman to have space to sort of stop and to really reflectively think about what it is that she's feeling and what it is that she believes, and to express it. And in doing that, you have the opportunity as her conversation partner to mirror that back to her, and she can hear what she believes from your perspective as you recount it. You mirror that to her, and then she can correct you, and she'll have a bit of a more a calmer state to do that. And here's the thing that I think is really lacking, and this is where I want to go in the context of our conversation as it is right now with children and emotions. What we have in society right now is, with the advent of the cell phone in 2010 and the absolute spike in dysfunctions in our youth. If you just read The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, you'll see this is going on. The research,
great book.
The research demonstrates it. It proves it. It is. Book. I would go so far as it proves causation and not just correlation.
Wow.
But you see that kids do not have the sacred space that they need for relationship, for spirituality, for social health. They're constantly inundated with input and communication. The screen time, the scrolling, there's not this time that they need to be down, to process and really kind of cope and understand with what they're doing. And so this stress, this anxiety gets embodied, and that comes out in various ways, in ADHD, in dysfunction, and in disordered relationships. And parents who have not kept their child, and I'll use the word intentionally, parents who have not kept their child safe from screen time are seeing the consequences of withdrawal symptoms from their kids when screens are taken away. Tantrums are thrown. And it's a disaster. Yeah. Something that was meant for a lot of good, that is communication and information, turns out to be something that is highly addictive, highly destructive. Now, going on for this, we're not only talking about kids in the context of our conversation, but this extends to adults as well, because you don't just at some magical age stop being connected with your emotions. Adolescence continues into the mid-20s, so your brain is still growing into your mid-20s, and you're still dealing with emotions and the formation of that and deep foundations. And your brain actually, which has been demonstrated in the last couple of years, it remains changeable, flexible. It's called brain plasticity. And so they've demonstrated in elderly individuals that the brain can still change and still rewire itself. So there is this continual growth process that's happening, which means we should never give up some sort of meditative aesthetic practice of fasting from technology, fasting from all the input and chaos that we have. Obviously physical exercise is important. Diet is super critical as well. Good sleep. And I'm just saying that that as an adult in the 2020s, almost now the second half of the 2020s, well, we're past that point. It's September, so we're past the point of 2025, and we're entered into we're closer to 2030 now, which
quarter
is
century.
Yeah, which is just crazy. We're seeing ever so more obviously the consequences of a society that just is not regulated and not in touch with its own self.
No, and that's what I like. I'm glad you bring it up. I'm not going to go too far into this, but that is something that I have noticed, is that when it comes to especially political conversations, man, I know that there are, I can get behind some of the sentiment of okay, quote unquote, facts don't care about your feelings, but my feelings don't care about your facts. So if you want to heal the country, if you want to bring people together, then you've got to consider the other person's emotions, because if they're dysregulated, on the other side of whatever aisle, who literally on both sides of the aisle, people are dysregulated, then we have to find a way to communicate that is not just slamming people with logic, not just slamming people with data, not just slamming people with my emotions, but having this kind of whole brain activity going on. And so it is interesting. On Jonathan Haidt's Instagram page, he'll put videos of schools, middle schools and elementaries that go phone free, go completely phone free. It reminds me of my middle school and elementary, and it's wow, that looks so fun.
One of the amazing and I think extremely useful ideas that he has in that book is he has created a Google Doc that you can access and contribute to with suggestions and examples and current events in your own area and schools, ideas that will help. Cool. I have a link to that somewhere.
Should we put that in the description?
Yeah, I can look that up. I have the link somewhere. I think it's actually in my Google Drive, so I can add that. That is very useful. And schools are saying, hey, no cell phones allowed during the day. Yeah. And parents who I think parents really need to understand why that's important. And that book is just one source. So there's another really great book called Restless Devices, and I'll send that as well. But let's move this over into the theological area. Given the stress that we have in society, socially speaking, and just emotionally, all the charged events, the constant news feed, the constant doom scrolling, and the ever-present communication of texting and expectations there, and we constantly have our phone with us. Just today, this is a side point. I was just walking the dog this afternoon, and this lady was with her dog, and I'll put it this way: her dog was walking her. So the dog is out front. The dog is in charge, and I always, when I see owners like that, I say, "Oh, look at that dog! They're walking their human." So this dog and this lady were walking across the street diagonally. The lady was on her phone, like this, nose and eyes at the phone, and there was a truck oncoming. Oh, jeez! And she didn't even. It didn't appear as though she even noticed. So there's this attention.
She's on Mars, like Jonathan Haidt puts it.
She's on Mars, so she's not even present. No. So there's problems there. But let's go to the theological aspect, the spiritual aspect. Yeah. We have, as Christians, we have been charged to be ambassadors of reconciliation, to return to friendship. That's what the word reconciliation means, to return to friendship. We are charged to be kings and priests. Let's put it this way. Melchizedek is the king of righteousness, and he's also the king of Salem. So we are to bring a sense of righteousness and right standing that someone has with the Father, but also a sense of peace. Jerusalem, Melchizedek, the king of Salem here, he is the king of peace. So if we have a gospel where we're meant to bring reconciliation, righteousness, and peace. And then, of course, we know in the kingdom, righteousness, peace, and joy in the Holy Spirit, is we have to have a gospel message that produces that. And unfortunately, it only takes a little leaven to leaven the whole lump.
We have a lot of leaven right now.
There's a lot of leaven in the lump that we give to people as the gospel. And the leaven looks like the yeah buts or the whatabouts. God is holy, but, or God is love, but
what is your most generous portrayal of what people's gospel is today?
Yeah.
Like, if you were to put it as much into their words as possible, what would you say is the gospel?
Yeah. Okay.
So, kind of playing devil's advocate a little bit.
Good. I'm taking a moment because I thought you were going to go somewhere else with that question.
Oh, sorry.
So you want me to express? See, this is mirroring. We're communicating. I'm taking time to listen, to respond, and not react. So you want me to convey or express how most people in Western society understand the gospel. Simply put, there is enmity between you and God, and that enmity has separated you and God, and it will last for all eternity.
Original sin. Unless
you accept what God has done for you, because God is not only just, He's also love. If you accept that, then you will be at peace with God, and you can be saved and go to heaven.
As opposed to go to hell as the alternative.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, that sounds nice, but it's not the gospel.
Yeah. So you see leaven in that.
That is very much the leaven that is problematic within theology.
Yeah. And, how are we looking on time? By the way?
Yeah, and we are limited on time. Sorry to say, we have a couple more minutes, so this is a good two-parter maybe. Jesus's main thrust was not to get people to go to heaven, to get them saved and go to heaven. That's not why He came. Jesus came to reveal the Father, and that's what people were ignorant of, and that's why He constantly reinforced people's identity. Shouldn't this daughter of Abraham, who has been bent down or bent over these 18 long years, shouldn't she be healed? Or the healing that He does on the Sabbath, which, all the healings that He does are on the Sabbath. So that just totally violates, the Pharisaical, laws of the Sabbath. Oh yeah, Jesus was
like all of them. Kind of thing.
Go back to Bema. I'll have to
fact check. True.
I'm thinking.
Question mark?
Yeah, So he definitely heals on the Sabbath, which is against the man's
we know he heals.
Understanding of the law. So Jesus came not to get you to heaven, but for you to
see the Father,
to see and understand and know the Father, because no one knew the Father before Jesus revealed Him.
Yeah.
So
you see these connecting with the separation of children on their phones from the real world and everything. You see that tie in.
What we're talking about here, so you asked me first to give an illustration of what the basic gospel message is and how it's heard and how it's presented. I think I did that pretty fairly.
You did.
I'm willing to be corrected on that. There's a
Comment below if you disagree.
There's a lot of different ways to express that in the mainstream. But I will say that the point of Jesus' message is not so you would go to heaven, not that you would be saved in a legal sense, but more so that you would be saved in a medicinal sense, in a relational sense, that you would be healed and restored to this relationship
saved from what?
that the Father never withdrew from. He never abandoned us. He was always with us. If Jesus told us He would never leave us nor forsake us, Jesus is no better than the Father, so we know the Father is the same way. He'll never leave us nor forsake us. And He has been present with us, even while we were in the Garden of Eden, even when we needed to leave the Garden of Eden, he went with them. And Moses even said, "We're not going to go anywhere unless you go with us." And God said, "Okay, here's my goodness." Okay,
yeah.
all right. So I share that because this gospel message that is so prevalent has within it some leaven that eventually spreads to the rest of the lump. And I'm going to use someone else's observation about the creeds of their own fellowship, where they saw a dysfunction in the relationships and especially in how the Father was presented through the creeds of the church and the things that were taught from the pulpit, that there was a leaven that was in the teaching that affected a person's relationship with a Father. And that is that the Father is really hard to please, that you're constantly in this position of like, have I done enough? Am I good enough? Is God really actually taking count of my sins and keeping records?
Yeah. Or if I'm not good enough, when will I become good enough?
When will I be good enough?
What do I have to do?
So my mentor used to say it this way. He said, "Jeremy, religion will tell you that you'll never arrive." And at the time, I understood what he said because I had this distinct understanding of grace and law mentality at that time. But I think I've come in my own journey to realize that it's a little bit deeper than that. I think we never will really arrive because God is something that is so much beyond us, but he's drawing us to him, so we're ever moving towards him. But we're also at peace in our situation. I think what religion does is it tells us we'll never be enough. There's a difference. So religion, as I'm seeing it right now, will tell you, well, you'll never be enough. You'll never be good enough for the Father. He will never be fully pleased and satisfied with you. There's always some sin that he wants you to be aware of, which is a sin-focused relationship with God. My point is, this person, in observing the creeds of their church, noticed that as the number of people attending the fellowship was dwindling drastically, they noticed within the creeds of the church this leaven that was really problematic and quite honestly causing some psychological distress, not only in him, but also in other people, and therefore the numbers were dwindling. That leaven produces this psychological black hole, as it were, that just eventually begins to grow and consume all that's there. My point in sharing all this, from the psychological side, where are we finding that peace, that satisfaction, that contentment, that boundary from all the stuff that would rob us of our joy, emotionally, relationally, socially, psychologically? But we have to also understand theologically. We have to have all these different components in place. I was watching a video just recently about the different elements that are necessary to be in a line for reality to work. The position of the earth from the sun, not too close, not too far. The amount of oxygen in the atmosphere has to be a certain percent.
A beautiful, or what's the documentary called? A Beautiful Planet?
A Privileged Planet. But I was watching something else, and this is for a different purpose.
Okay.
But it's like if we have the social and the psychological and the emotional and the intellectual and even the physical stuff in line, but if there's leaven that is spreading in our spirituality, in our theology, it's going to eventually bring down the whole edifice, the whole building. And I think, at least now, as these other areas have grown, as neuroscience is growing. There's just recently an academic journal that has just been established on neuroscience, I found out, which is really cool. The very first article is the reason for that academic journal, and I think, okay, I need to pay attention to this. As we increase in the psychological sciences, the social sciences, the neurology, all of this stuff, theology has to keep pace. Theology cannot stay stagnant. It has to understand why these other areas are important, and it has to be able to have the space for
when you say
for reflective intellectual conversation and a good look in the mirror to say, hey, is what we believe really healthy and helpful? And if it's not, then we need to actually go back to the source of our spiritual life, the Logos himself, the word of God, the Logos, and say, okay, Jesus, what does it look like to be fully human and fully divine? And let us grow from there. Okay.
Yeah. So when you say how much?
5 more minutes.
5 more minutes. Okay. When you say, I'll wrap it up maybe. When you say that the theological side of this needs to keep pace, the scientific community has no problem just going and going and going and going, because it's built off of arguing with itself, contending against itself. That's what makes it scientific to a point.
Unless it has to do with COVID.
Well, okay.
Unless it has to do with COVID, the way you do science is you question science.
Yeah, right. Okay. Well,
but question theology and deeply held.
So so like that's where it's like, rough. Okay, the religious community or just religion in general doesn't have necessarily a way to progress necessarily, like as in stature or in understanding, but rather just continue. It has a system of maintaining, not necessarily progressing. And so in that sense, you're saying religion needs to keep pace. You're saying, hey, pastors, pay attention to these fields. Or you're saying, hey, Christian thought leaders or worship leaders or just general street goers that, are Christians, pay attention to this. Bring this up in conversation.
So pastoral counseling as a field within the church is only about 75 to 100 years old. We didn't have pastoral counseling before that point. So in other words, there was not this informed understanding of the human person in what was taught in church, except for just simply labeling people in black and white terms as sinner and saint. Okay, and the sinner is always the other person, right? It's never really a part of our group.
Classic.
So from the 1950s, with the advent of psychology in the early 20th century, Freud especially, we were beginning to understand, wait a minute, there are deep psychological, empirically proven thought processes and beliefs in the person, and those are really important to understand and begin to work with. So in the 1950s, pastoral counseling began to be addressed, and especially it sort of got widely started in the 70s into the 90s. Henry Nouwen is one of those persons that really was flying with this field in the 80s and 90s. And I think now, since we've had, in the neurological sciences, since we've had something called functional MRIs, fMRIs, which is where you can see actually what's happening in the body in real time, not just a static image. You can see how someone processes fear or anxiety or a sense of peace. Right. So there's such a greater understanding of what it means to be a human person that theology now is in a place, and it's beginning to do this. I'm not speaking in a bubble here. I'm not the only one who's seeing this or taking actions. It's growing, and it's pretty amazing. And I think also within Christianity, there is a revival of the early church's understanding of what it means to be human. As one of my professors told me, quote, the early church had a better anthropology than we do today. True. So as this is happening, as this is happening, I think theology.
That's such a great line.
Yeah.
So I'm getting kind of wrecked by that. I'm like, because like even with all of our technology today, we're just basically relearning a lot of things we already understood to be factual way back when. Anyway,
So anyway, the faith communities, Christianity, religion in the best possible sense of the word, they are beginning to incorporate and need to understand this. Religion, Western evangelical Christianity needs to come out of its foxhole. Needs to get out. Sorry to say this, but it needs to come out of the cave and see the sun, the light.
Cave?
And really demonstrate.
Yeah.
Wow. There's something deeper to the text.
Yeah.
You listen to a podcast like Bema, it's always in the text.
Yeah.
Whatever Jesus has everything that Jesus did and said, it's in the text. Meaning, you look at what we call the Old Testament. Which I am changing my vocabulary based on Father John Bear's insistence that we not call it Old Testament and New Testament.
First Testament and Second Testament.
No, just scriptures.
Just scriptures.
He said,
that's fair enough.
He said if it was good enough for the early church to call what was written the scriptures, it's good enough for us.
I like that.
Anyway, so I think summation point. As I am studying and writing for my doctorate in theology and understanding personhood and theological anthropology, I'm just seeing how a black and white view of the person is absolutely and utterly destructive.
I mean, personally, I really enjoyed this dialogue. If you guys did watching this, please comment, let us know in person. We'd love to hear your voice. Outside of that, I think that this has been a fruitful conversation. If you have any questions, let us know. We can look into figuring out how to address those if people actually want to hear more on these kinds of subjects. I really want to go dig deeper actually into not just dopamine, like we always talk about dopamine, but also talk about oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins, and how those actually play and correlate when it comes to scientific stuff. Everybody's so constantly focused on dopamine. It's like, that's great, but let's not neglect the three other siblings here.
Right.
They also have a role to play. So we'll look into those conversations further and keep that. We should have a slogan. That'd be cool. For Icons of the Gospel, or less heresy. But in the meantime, keep it less heresy than it. We should have something like that.
Yeah, let's go
we
with
don't.
That,
We'll chat GPT that too. Any final words?
So there'll be stuff, information posted in the video. Make sure you check that out. And thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
And we will be announcing some exciting things to come up and changes in the ministry, things that are good and beneficial and moving onward and upwards, as one of my college professors would say.
Yeah.
So
till next time.
Ciao.
We're good. Are you comfortable? You look like you're straddling the table right now.
I'm good.
Are you good?
I'm good.
Okay.